5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is a short tutorial on making notched legs for work tables. I'm making several different tables for my shop, and I thought this would be a good reference for those that are curious on how to make notched legs. I think it's best to show the finished product with the cuts already in the leg so you can see what's going on. There's two sets of cuts, and on the bottom face that's where the 2x4s rest, and they're really good for holding a lot of weight. The other great thing is this makes the table a lot more resistant to force and vibration. I also have a 4x4 with a 2x4 already assembled in it, but there's no fasteners in there, and if I pull and push on that as hard as I can, it's just not going to budge because it's so rigid. At this point, I have a leg of the desired length, and I'm just measuring up everything to fit the 2x4s. Now I measure two 3.5-inch wide slots into the 4x4. One end is the top end, so the top end I like to have the 2x4 rest so that it sticks out about 1/8 to 1/16 from the top of the 4x4, and then the other board, when I cut that out, I like to have the board be 7 inches from the bottom. I find the 7-inch measurement from the bottom handy because what I can do is I can stack, for example, two 4x4 pieces, one on top of the other, and keep it underneath the board whenever I start assembling the table. It makes the bottom supports easier to install. Now it's time to cut into the board. I like to cut very carefully along the edges of the slots where I have my lines, and then after that I start cutting with a table saw, and I cut usually about 1/8 of an inch between cuts. That's about 3 millimeters for you metric guys. So if you cut any thicker, it becomes more of a pain to deal with, and if you cut any thinner, you'll start having more pieces flying up into your body, maybe into your face, so I don't really recommend it. I'll continue with some more cutting footage, but I'll speed it up in a few seconds so it's in fast forward. But in the meantime, I thought I'd mention something about 2x4s. Sometimes people will mention that you should use 2x4s to make the legs instead of 4x4s, but in most cases what's all that'll ever happen is you're just going to be wasting time and money. You're really better served just starting off with 4x4s in my opinion. When it's done improperly, the forces tend to go right down through the center of the leg down between the two 2x4s, and then you end up with less rigidity. The next step involves taking all those chips that you see in those slots and knocking them out. One technique is to just take a hammer and chisel and try knocking them out. But that's not really my preferred method, and what I'm just demonstrating here is how it just doesn't work as effectively as you would think it might. But an alternative, I'll show it in a few seconds, is instead of a hammer and chisel, what the ideal thing to use is the combination of a hatchet and mallet, and that really helps break the chips out a little quicker. You just stick it between each about every 2 to 4 chips, and then just knock them right out. It happens a lot. It does the job a lot faster, and you won't have as much cleanup with your remaining 4x4. I'll show a few more seconds of additional footage where I'm breaking up chips with that method, and then I'll just kind of tilt up the board so you can see it a little better, and then we'll move on to the next step. Once I'm finished with the hammer and mallet method, I take the 4x4 and I clamp it on its side so that I can start chiseling out the remaining portions of wood until it's somewhat flatter. It doesn't have to be perfectly chiseled out, it just needs to be enough to where you can get it for the next step. That way, whenever you get most of it out, it'll be easier to use a rasp planer on the surfaces. You'll also notice that I'm only chiseling on this one surface. I'm not chiseling on the surface where the 2x4 rests on the 4x4 because that's already been cut by the saw, so it should be perfectly straight, and since it's so straight, there's no reason to go and use the chisel on that. Once I get this first section of wood chiseled out, I'll move on to the second one, but I'll play it in fast forward so then we can get through this a little quicker. Now we're getting into the final stages of cleaning up the 4x4. So what I typically do is I get a rasp planer. It's kind of like in a very aggressive wood file, and it's got a thin blade. You just push it back and forth across the wood, and it works at a pretty fast pace. It'll get the wood nice and flat to a point where you can get that 2x4 to rest on it. I like to get it. One reason I like to clean up with a chisel before using the rasp planer is that if you leave too many high surfaces with a rasp planer, that blade can be a little bit delicate, and sometimes people will break the blades. So I think it's a good idea to chisel before you do that. It also saves quite a bit of time. I'm almost done with this first section, so right after I'm done with that, I'll move on to the second one, but I'll play it in turbo mode to save a little time. Another tip is to use a piece of 2x4 to gauge how well you're doing on your work with that 4x4. So here I'm just demonstrating how I do that. I managed to get it to work on the first try. Here I just wanted to demonstrate how flat this is right here. You don't have to make it this flat, but you can get it as close as you feel like. And then this is pretty even as well. It didn't take much time to make that cut and fix it out with a rasp planer. So we'll move on to the next step.